This is more of an informational video. Going back to roughly 1994 and what websites sort of were made of in those days. And one thing that was sort of around was the fact that we didn't have any style attributes. So my heading didn't have a style, or my paragraph didn't have a style. So they were basically quite boring web pages. In fact, it wouldn't have had the viewport. It wouldn't have had doc type HTML. That would have been a little larger, but I'm not really going to mess around with those. I'm only thinking of the things that appear on the page, and to take out the details that were not around in 1994, so that we can create a very basic styled web page. So if I refresh that, there we go. So that's how the web page would have looked in those days. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning it is, let me go to W3 Schools, and I'm going to go for this one, HTML attributes, because slowed it down. These tags had attributes. They didn't have a style attribute, that came later, but they were able to color things and change things. So for example, let's go back to this one. Let's go and find the one called background color, BG color. Have I got the list of attributes? Probably it's in the reference section. There we go, attributes. So here we've got all the attributes that you can put into the tags, and on the left we've got what the attribute is, and on the right we've got which tag it belongs to, and it can belong to a few, and we've seen some already. So for example, we've got href, target, width, height, all these different attributes, and I'm going to look for an old one called background color, and there we are, BG color. Notice it's not underlined, so there's no link to it, and it's now saying it's not supported in HTML5, so it's gone out of use, but it's still available. We can still use it. And if I go back to my body, it tells me, well, it didn't tell me where it was used, it just says it's not supported anymore. But in my body, if I typed in here BG color equals, and then let's say, it's difficult thinking of a color now. Let's see if I can do powder blue. Probably won't recognize that one. Let's try. Let's go refresh my page. Oh, it has done. So this is now colored the background of my web page in powder blue in an old style. So we didn't have the attribute style, that came much later, and styles are called cascading style sheets, and they're constantly changing. They're still changing today on what you can do. There's no sort of a totally agreed standard, it's changing every day. But this is how we used to colour our web pages with BG colour, and we used to have fonts and a few things, but essentially what you're seeing here is pretty much all that could be done. There were a few more things that I'm not going to teach you at the moment. So if I go back here, if I go to HTML tags, one of the tags was called a table, and we could put a table in. So where are we? Table, there we go. So if I look at the table tag, this was really how web pages were sort of split up, and the layout on the screen was made, and it was incredibly complicated, very complicated. Oh, and here we go. It says here, note, tables should not be used for page layout. It used to be. Historically, some web authors have misused tables as a way to control their web page layout. I don't think they misused them. It was the only way to do it. However, there are a variety of alternatives using CSS. So tables used to be the way that we used to make the pages look good. And that is now deprecated. And I'll come to that word a little bit later. It's an important word. Another thing that we sort of need to look at later on, I'm not really going to go into tables. Tables now we are only going to be using for actual data if we need them, and very rarely. But one thing that we will use a lot of that was in the old definition of HTML in the early versions was this, the form tag. And really we can do a great deal with the form tag, and we'll play with this a lot. But before we play with it, we really need to understand how to send information to another web page. We need to know how web pages are laid out so that we can actually deal with the information that appears on a form. So if you want to have a look before we go there, then feel free. Go and have a look at how forms are, but I will cover these later, but I will cover them when we deal with programming in PHP. Other than that, a lot of these tags were available or are available. Some of them have gone into retirement, so I think this is one that either has taken over or has gone into retirement. We need to have a look at the tags to find out which ones have gone into retirement, and that's really what deprecated means. But we've seen the majority of tags that will help us create web pages. And it's up to you how you create them now, and I suggest that you play around a little bit, go and get some images, get some links to other pages, get some links to other websites, get some links to your friends' websites, and just create a very simple page. Try it in the old style. Don't use style sheets at the moment. We will cover those later if you need to, such as on the paragraph tag. Then give it a go. Don't worry if it doesn't work, but this should be fine. So I'm going to leave it to you now to create a few pages and show me what you can actually do with it. In the next video we will start to look at some forms and how they work, but as I said, we need to think about programming as well. So that's where the server is going to come in incredibly useful, because it just won't work on your client.